One of the most notorious and infamous stories of the Tudor period is that of the execution of Mary Queen of Scots. The Catholic Mary was a constant threat for Queen Elizabeth I, as many Catholics across England saw her as the legitimate heir to the throne, and subsequently saw Elizabeth as illegitimate. There was already a huge divide and division across Elizabethan society with regards to religion, but after a number of different plots to oust Elizabeth and place Mary on the English throne were discovered, Elizabeth took decisive action. Mary Queen of Scots had already been placed in prison for almost 2 decades as she arrived in England following being forced out of Scotland. However, upon the discovery and implication of Mary in the Babington Plot, Elizabeth was finally convinced to sign her death warrant. At Fotheringhay Castle, the execution of Mary Queen of Scots was carried out on the 8th of February 1587. Fast forward over 400 years, and we today are still captivated by her story. However, a news story broke recently how Mary's execution jewellery was actually stolen inside Arundel Castle. Join us today as we look at the stolen jewellery of Mary Queen of Scots, and remember to support our channel. Please make sure to subscribe. The execution of Mary Queen of Scots today lives on in infamy. The story of an anointed Catholic queen slowly making her way into the execution chamber inside the Great Hall of Fotheringhay Castle, surrounded by nobles and dignitaries, is one that captures the imagination. The fact she was wearing the colour of a liturgical martyr, and that she faced her death with courage and grace, still moves historians today. Of her execution, a contemporary account stated, "Then Mr. Dean, Dr. Fletcher, the Dean of Peterborough, said with a loud voice, 'So perish all of the Queen's enemies,' and afterwards the Earl of Kent came to the dead body, and standing over it with a loud voice said, 'Such end of all the Queen's and the Gospel's enemy.' Then one of the executioners, pulling off her garters, spied her little dog, which was crept under her cloths, which could not be gotten by force, yet afterwards would not depart from the dead corpse, but came and lay beside her head and her shoulders, which became imbued with her blood, and was carried away and washed, as all things else, where that she had any blood, was either burned or washed clean, and the executioners sent away with money for their fees, not having one thing that belonged unto her. And so every man being commanded out of the hall, except the sheriff and his men, she was carried by them up into the great chamber, lying ready for the surgeons to embalm her." What this is saying is that after Mary Queen of Scots' execution, there was very little left of her, especially the items that she would have left behind. As lockdown measures eased across England, at around 10:30 p.m. on Friday the 21st of May 2021, at Arundel Castle in West Sussex, the police were alerted to the fact there had been a break-in at the castle. Thieves had broken in through a window, according to Sussex police, and managed to make their way inside the castle, before smashing open a glass cabinet and grabbing a number of items. The items were described by a spokesman for Arundel Castle trustees as, "The stolen items have significant monetary value, but as unique artefacts of the Duke of Norfolk's collection, have immeasurably greater and priceless historical importance." Amongst the artefacts that were stolen was a set of gold rosary beads that the Catholic Mary Queen of Scots carried to her execution at Fotheringhay Castle, along with items worth more than £1 million. It was said that the Scottish Queen was carrying the beads as she headed to her execution, and even as the axe swung at Fotheringhay, taking her head clean off. The beads were stolen at Arundel Castle, which in history has had a long association with the title of the Duke of Norfolk, being the seat for the Duke for over 400 years. In particular, Thomas Howard, the 4th Duke of Norfolk, was the man who would seize the castle as it passed through his lineage. Eventually the Crown would seize the castle after the execution of Howard, when he was conspiring to marry Mary Queen of Scots in 1572. Thomas Howard was a man who was executed for his role in the Ridolfi Plot, which would have seen the already powerful noble becoming the possible king consort of England if the plot to place Mary on the throne would have worked. Because of these links, Arundel Castle does have a strong link to Mary Queen of Scots, and this is probably the reason why the jewellery and artefacts were kept inside the castle. As the executioner's axe fell upon the Catholic Queen and martyr, those who witnessed the events would gasp at the horror of a queen's death and beheading. After Mary's death, as she was possibly deemed to have become a martyr, pretty much all of her belongings she left at Fotheringhay Castle were burned to stop them becoming relics, and a huge amount of her possessions were taken or lost. That is what makes these rosary beads that were stolen extremely significant, due to the fact that there are actually very few artefacts that remain of Mary's life. They are considered an incredibly important item in the nation's heritage and in the story of Scotland and England. One of the biggest worries about the gold beads is the fact that thieves may want to melt them down to weigh them in on the price of gold. This would incredibly devalue the artefact, considering its historical value outweighs massively the financial value of the piece of metal. Amongst other items stolen were a number of coronation cups given to the Earl Marshal by Mary. The saddest part of the news of Mary's jewellery and rosary beads being stolen is the fact that very little exists of Mary's time on earth due to the desecration of the relics after her death. The thieves were happy to break into a place with vast history and stories and steal something which in terms of its historical value is priceless. A large police investigation is underway, and we hope that these artefacts are returned to their rightful place and that those involved in the thefts are brought to justice. Once again, thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.